and welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. Joining me on my line is my good friend, Julien DeMarco of the May He Rain vlog. Julien, my friend, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I thank you for joining me again tonight. And, ladies and gentlemen, Julien called me up, or he actually sent me a text here, and he got this email from Hillsdale College. And for those of you who don't know Hillsdale College, it's they're perceived as, or at least proclaimed to be the most conservative college in the country, teaching, again, the basic fabrics of American liberty in sort of this classical liberal right-wing kind of a mold. And you've probably heard, if you listen to conservative talk radio over the years, the advertisements on shows like Rush Limbaugh before he passed away. And I heard it just a couple of weeks ago as well, too, on Sean Hannity's shows. I was driving the car and they had an advertisement there. And I'm sure they've had a whole slew of advertisements with other conservative talk show hosts. And they pride themselves off this, again, this American classical liberal tradition where they're teaching traditional sort of American values in sort of that founding father, early American history kind of ideology. And Julien sent me this this text here, and it was a link to Hillsdale College. And apparently Hillsdale College is wants to fight back to take America back because there's some concerns, Julien, that liberty is being lost in America and that the far left has captured the institution of education in America. And I just want to read a small bit of this so we get a taste and a flavor of it. And we'll put this up for our audience here. I'll get a screenshot of this, but here's an official kind of, note here from Hillsdale College. Quote, help Hillsdale defend liberty nationwide by reaching and teaching millions before it's too late. To engage the forces of the far left on the battlefield of education in 2022 and preserve freedom for the future generations of Americans. The goal, raise $7 million from our online supporters by December 31st to expand our nationwide educational outreach efforts to counter the influence of anti-American ideologies like critical race theory. These efforts will reach and teach millions more citizens, especially younger Americans, about our nation's great heritage of liberty. And it goes on from there, Julien. And I guess, when I read something like this, I'm a little dumbfounded because the right has been preaching this notion of freedom and liberty now, ever since I was in the movement. And it just never seems to go that way. I mean, we got a 24-hour news cycle. Conservative talk radio has been preaching sort of the founding principles, the principles of freedom and liberty now since I was a young man. And the more things go wrong in America and the further left America goes, the more conservatives double down on this thing of liberty, liberty, liberty. We got to teach liberty. Here's the Constitution. Thump, 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 thump. But Julien, that plan never works. The country only goes to the left. Why is that?
It's a very interesting sociological, phenomenon. Why is it that the country is going so left? Why is it that the West is going so left? There are lots of reasons. If you're a religious person, if you're a Protestant, or some other type of Christian of that nature, it will be because you're not believing in God or the right type of God. If you're Catholic, it's because they're not Catholic or listening to the church. But I mean, if you look at the church, it's not in its human form, it's not in great shape either. So what is going on with the world, particularly in the West? What is this fascination that the West has with liberty? And what is liberty? What is this definition? Because liberty for a liberal Democrat or a leftist is completely different for a liberal in the conservative sense, a Republican. So, what is liberty? And I don't think you're ever going to get a really good definition of what liberty is. This is something I think, philosophers will be philosophizing for quite some time, and I guess I am willing to add to that bulk of philosophizing of basically, well, what is liberty and what is going on in this country or the West, and why does it seem that for something like Hillsdale College that constantly bangs on about liberty all the time, the country seems to be becoming more leftist. So for a Hillsdale, and it would seem Republicans and conservative liberals, it would seem that liberty means no critical race theory or any of these other wild and crazy transracial, no borders, that type of liberty. Yeah. But it seems to me that the logical conclusion of liberty is all of that. Because I say it all the time, what is it that conservatives actually conserve? They don't really. The only thing conservatives conserve are liberals' mistakes. The job of a conservative is to actually stop the mistakes of the liberals to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, because I've been beating this drum for a while now, I think if we try and take a legal definition what liberty is, I'll let somebody else handle that because I'm not a lawyer. Listen, Julien, I've always said I'm just an average guy. That's all. I'm a nobody, man. And I just do a show because I see things going wrong in this country and really throughout all of the West. And I'm a family man. I'm trying to raise my kids in a world gone mad. And what I can tell you is what the average person on the streets, what the practical application of liberty is in America from an ordinary, everyday citizen. And liberty, in my experience, has come to be defined as license. I could basically do almost anything I want to do, apart from some stipulations in regards to private property laws, right? Because the private property laws are cherished in our Constitution, right? As I said, and I'll keep repeating this, basic American morality is you do you, I do I, and as long as we don't, cross each other's property lines, we don't shoot each other. And I think this is a big problem because that liberty has overridden basic moral dictates of truth. Again, 2,000-year analogy of the faith, sacred tradition, the church, our ancestral roots, and it's overridden all those traditions in the name of, okay, let's continue to recreate new traditions that we can accommodate to our fallen nature. And because classical liberals, especially at the founding of the nation, never wanted to deal with our fallen nature, they gave us abstract, indifferent religion. We've never known how to deal with that as Americans, and here we are. I mean, listen, Julien, I'm not here to bash America for the sake of bashing America because, like I said before, I have everything at stake in this country. My livelihood, my kids' future, it's all here. When we present these ideas of frankly speaking and may he reign, it's about trying to overcome these challenges that everybody sees at this point in history. And my only point here with bringing up this, again, this position from Hillsdale College is there's nothing new here. And the very basic philosophical principles that they are now preaching are the same philosophical principles that have gotten us here to the brink of societal collapse. There's nothing different. They're preaching to the choir. Well, you guys have been around for over 100 years. You guys haven't saved America in over a century. What makes you think if I send you $39.95, you're going to save America now, Julien?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, but just regards to the property rights thing, and I'll tie it all into everything what you've asked. But it's interesting to note that even private property is under attack as well in this country.
Yeah.
If you're at your house and a burglar comes into your house, and they have a knife, you have a gun, and you shoot the burglar who broke into your house illegally and then tried to threaten you and your family or whoever is in your house, and you shoot them and the police are called, guess who's going to jail?
Yeah.
Not just the burglar, but you as well.
Yes, Julie, but the classical liberals, the conservatives will tell you that's not us. That's the progressives. That's the Marxists. That's the communists. It's not us. That's who we got to fight. If we fight the communists and the Marxists, we solve that problem, right, Julien?
Well, I still don't see that changing anytime soon. It doesn't. I mean, all of these, you know, I don't think most people realize that that gun laws in this country are incredibly racist, and also they go against the Constitution that the liberals love so much. So one of the things that the first laws enacted against gun ownership were against Black people for owning guns. Also, other minorities, Irish and Italians, and other people that they deemed unworthy to own firearms. And now you see a pattern with who can and who can't own guns these days. It is becoming an ideology of who can and who can't own guns. Conservatives can't own guns, but only certain liberals can own guns. But liberals don't want to own guns on a whole, but only certain liberals who are in positions of authority to abuse their power should own guns. But conservatives, to protect themselves from being abused by people who are in positions of authority with guns, should not be able to have guns. So it is.
So what you're saying is this is a pattern. America then has a history of looking at socially accepted groups versus socially unaccepted groups, and then we say that these are the people that can have guns, and these are the people that can't, based upon the social mores of the day. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. I haven't looked into that, so that's interesting.
Well, I think anybody that studies gun law or studies gun history in America, I'm an avid shooter, and I'm someone that likes to learn about gun history and gun safety, and I have a friend that is a very avid shooter as well, and he's more gun knowledgeable than I am. So when we're out shooting, we talk guns.
Yeah.
So this is just stuff that I've learned over the course of my gun sportsmanship, if you will.
Right.
But with the whole Hillsdale College thing as well, it's like you said, they've been here 100 years. When are you going to save America? Because the country has, from when the university, or sorry, not university, college. It's a college, right? Not a university.
It's a college, yes.
College, yes. The college was founded over 100 years ago, and this country's still not conservative. I haven't really been able to find out what a conservative country, or at least in a Republican Democratic sense, what a conservative country is supposed to look like. What are they going to save us from?
Yeah, what are they going to conserve? I don't know, because we've been going to the left pretty much since the founding, and I'm not buying that argument that some Catholics are saying that between 1776 and the start of the Civil War, that everything was okie dokie in America. I mean, that, for good golly, man, that's 70 years. That's one tiny grain of sand in the hourglass of history. And so I really don't know, because the country has been going perpetually to the left. I don't know what a conservative country would look like. I know I have an idea, at least, what a Catholic country would look like, or at least a nation under the governance of Christendom, because it lasted for 1,400 years. Granted, there's nuances and there was ups and downs in Christendom because of fallen human nature, but it lasted for 1,400 years before it was taken down essentially by the sword and the gun and the guillotine. But in America, we've been kind of going to the left, and this is what I keep asking my friends on the right. And speaking of Hillsdale College, they've been around, Julien, since 1844, Julien. Okay?
Oh, my.
All right. I mean, we're going out here 180 years, roughly 175 years. And so if they haven't stopped this perpetual shift to the left in America in 175 years, when does this start? It's like I said with Limbaugh. Limbaugh, who I liked, I think was a good and decent man who had good intentions. I think he was wrong in a lot of things. He boasted himself as the voice of the conservative right and how he accomplished all these things in the culture and how he saved the conservative movement when when the liberal media was dominating and things like that. But Rush went to his grave 30 years into his broadcasting career as the voice of the right. America, he left earlier this year. May God have mercy. So the country is more liberal now than when it was when he first came onto radio, and that goes for all of really talk radio at this point in time. And again, I ask my friends on the right, when do we save America from this liberal behemoth that is taking control of all the institutions across the globe, from the media to education to governments to name your institution, sports and everything for that matter. And nobody has an answer for me other than liberty, 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 liberty. Well, I'm starting to conclude maybe the concept of liberty, and because we replace God in Christendom with the concept of liberty, maybe liberty is actually the problem, Julien.
Well, I would say that liberty is the problem, at least from my viewpoint.
Right. Whatever liberty means, right? That's the other question.
Yeah, well, whatever liberty means, that is the question. I mean, that's the $1 million question. I mean, you speak to a traditional Catholic, you'll get one answer. You speak to a Novus Ordo Catholic, you get one answer. You speak to this type of Protestant, you get one answer. You speak to a conservative Republican, you get this answer. You speak to a Democrat liberal, you get this answer. None of these, liberty is different for everybody. So there is no real, in my mind, for me personally, there is no one monolithic true liberty. But what I do know, what I have observed and what I have experienced and what I have seen and what I have learned throughout history, the mantra of liberty has destroyed everything that I love. So that's what I do. That's what I do know about liberty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way I feel. That's the way I feel, because I feel the world has been turned upside down and there's no real answers. And everything that I have loved in this life, from my faith to my family to rich culture to standards and mores and morals and moral principles, it's all been wiped out. It's all been wiped, and it's been wiped out, ironically enough, in my lifetime alone. Now somebody a little older than me, I'm sure, can point out other things that broke down. It's this conversation I was having with my wife just actually today or yesterday, where I said, look at our lifetime alone. Look how radically morality has changed. It's been turned upside down in our lifetime alone. And I don't know, Julien, if any other generation in human history has had such a radical change in such a short period of time, where moral principles have really been turned upside down and are the polar opposite of when we were just young boys and young girls. I mean, I'd like to ask Charles Coulomb this question. I don't know if historically we can pinpoint this question, Julien, but has there ever been a generation like ours that has lived through such a radical transformation of morality, and nobody, including on the political right, has any answers to this?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember, when I was in middle school, back in 2004 and 2003, I remember this girl got pregnant and she kept the baby, but it was shocking that someone in middle school got pregnant. But, fast forward, I think, till about maybe 2012 and a little after that era, now you have like shows on MTV glorifying teenage pregnancy reality TV shows called Teen Moms.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, from 2003, 2004 to 2012, you have reality TV shows about teenage pregnancy, which is glorifying. It's not actually, showing the fact that teenage pregnancy is a bad thing. And it's turning these teen moms into stars and celebrities. It's fascinating. Just you talk about in your lifetime alone. I mean, same with mine, and I mean, but I guess it's also slightly maybe all all life is change. The only constant in life is change. That is true. But by which that change occurs, some change takes a lifetime. So 100 years.
Yeah.
But change within, 50, 30 something years, that's massive.
Yeah.
That's really different from change in previous generations.
Yes.
And when I mean previous generations, I mean the 1800s, the early 1900s, the 1700s, really since the start of the Industrial Revolution, well, the late Industrial Revolution, so the steam age and the train age of the Victorian era.
Yeah. Yeah.
You really start to see this rampant change every like within less than a generation, less than 50 years. You really start seeing this massive change in technology, the way that people transport themselves from one place to another, from how businesses are done. And now look at us. I mean, you and I are on two opposite ends of the country,
Yeah.
talking and posting things. I grew up in a time where people still had pagers, beepers, and and the coolest thing was having your own landline as a teenager, not having a cell phone, having your own landline
in your room.
in your room with your own personal number.
Yes.
I mean,
I remember that. Oh my! It's funny that you say that because I remember all of that. Listen. I think you're absolutely right. I think technology and mass transit, right, has put a lot of these moral dysfunctions on hyper speed. I think that's contributed to the problem. But Julie, for my part, I still remember. Listen, I'm 50 years old, and I still remember. I was a kid raised during the 80s, right? I got the full decade in regards to, the maturity level and what I remember. And I remember as early as the early 80s, talking with friends as young boys, how we still wanted a future wife that was a virgin, a woman that had never been touched by another man, because that was the value of our ancestors. That's the purity of our Catholic faith. That's the purity of Christianity that Christ and the Holy Mother and the Holy Family taught us. And within just a matter of a decade and a half, that was all wiped out. Now it's a situation where young men are hoping that young ladies haven't slept with more than 20 dudes. I mean, that's how radical it is now, right? If you find a young lady that's only had one or two or three sexual partners, you better take her up on that, man. Julian?
Yeah, I mean, I was just interesting. I was having a conversation with a coworker, a guy, and I was talking about wanting to find someone who was also a virgin, untouched. And you know what he said? I kid you not. Good luck with that. That's never happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you just got to know the right places to look. He's not. I mean, he's not religious by any means. So of course, it's that whole concept of being a virgin at my age. Because generally I'm in my I'm a young adult. So, any woman that I'm going to go out with, presumably, because me and my coworker, we're relatively the same age. What woman is a virgin at our age?
Yeah,
So yeah,
doesn't
it's
exist. It's all gone.
it doesn't exist. But I mean,
But we got
it,
liberty, Julian. But we got liberty. Okay.
yeah, we got liberty. But I
Yeah,
mean, if you look in the right places, you'll find that type of woman. But in the general society, you're not going to find that. And if you do, it's very rare, and you're more likely not going to respect it.
that's right. And I think again, we got liberty. And because these young ladies, just like a lot of young men as well, too, just like the whole culture, have taken their liberties to express their sexual nature, to express their desires, to fulfill again this very powerful drive. Sexuality, right? It's very powerful. In the old world, before the concept of liberty existed, right? Or at least this laissez-faire, secular liberty, whatever it is, right? We had moral standards and moral dictates that said, okay, wait, you're supposed to wait till you get married, right? Young ladies, stay a virgin. Young men, control yourselves. You're going to get some after you get married, and you take it before God, that kind of a thing. But because we replaced God with liberty in the secular world, that's out the window. We have no more moral arbiters of truth to
I
say
think
that this is right, this is wrong, Julian.
I think from a sociological and psychological and from a historical standpoint, for most of society, whether BC or AD, um, as soon as you were old enough to procreate, you got married.
Yes.
So you didn't have, an 18-year-old going off to college or whatever the case may be and sowing his wild oats. I mean, at 18, he was either, if he was depending on what type of country you were, depending on, the century, you were either a farmhand or whatever. You were a tradesman in a village, or if you lived in a city, you did other things, whatever. But the fact is, as soon as you were able to procreate, you got married.
Yeah.
So by the time you were 18, you probably already had 2 kids.
Yeah.
So there is the ancient wisdom and knowledge is good wisdom and knowledge.
That's right.
For a reason, whether it's Protestant, Catholic, pagan, whatever the case may be. This idea that as soon as your sexual functionings are awakened, you lock it down.
Yeah.
And that fixes that problem.
It does.
Because but what we are doing in modern society, we're telling children from their sexual maturity, their preteens or 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, go to school for 5, 6, 7 hours a day for 4, 5, 6 years. Then you're 18. Then we're telling you, go to school for another 4 or 5 years, off from home from 18 till you're 23. And it's just like, and then we tell them, oh, don't get married until you find a job. Oh, but yeah, have a girlfriend, shack up. And it's just like, none of this is,
it doesn't work.
From a historical, psychological, social point, it doesn't work, because these are the prime years that you as a human being will be most sexually potent to want to do what is natural, and that is to engage in the act of intimacy and to also want to procreate. Whether you believe it or not, that is one of the main. Listen, people, when you have sex, you are going to get pregnant. It is Russian roulette, and no amount of pills or abortions is going to change that fact.
Yep. I mean, that's beautifully said. There's not much more I can add because those are my sentimentalities. Exactly. Our sort of our sexual nature has been altered in this, again, in this land of liberty, of the economic engine of prosperity, and how they force us into a system, and how the structures of our current society really enamor us, or at least put us in a position where we're constantly in a state of sin. That's the irony of it all. And with that type of sin, the sexual sin we're talking about, that's how the dysfunction, the broken family comes about in America and really the rest of the West. And so, Julien, as we start to wrap up this thing, I don't like coming on here and simply saying America is wrong, or America is bad, or America got it wrong here and got it wrong there. Again, I got everything invested in this country. I want a future for myself. I want a future for my children. But the more I look around, I just tend to think that nobody's truly serious now. And when I see something like this from Hillsdale College, and they're asking for money to do something they've always done, they haven't gotten it right for about 175 years. But all of it, it's funny. I saw this video today. I think I sent it to you. You ever look at, conservative advertising? So, yeah,
Yeah.
both conservative
Yeah,
and liberals. What I found
well,
interesting is how conservatives advertise, right? Listen, I got a bottle of water here, Julian. This is Patriot water. If you buy my bottle of water for $29.95, you're gonna be a great American, okay? Patriot water, right, Julian?
yeah, yeah. And what's also interesting is that they'll have sponsors that'll drop them. I remember whenever I was watching Ben Shapiro very heavily,
Yeah.
he was his one sponsor. I think it was a toothbrush company.
Yeah.
And he was promoting the heck out of it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I think, as if Ben Shapiro was never was for abortion. I think he always touts how he became more anti-abortion because of his wife, who is a doctor. We must always make sure that people know Ben Shapiro's wife is a doctor.
Sure.
Because he always says it.
Okay.
But,
well, I figured it out. My wife's not a doctor, and I figured it out. So.
But I think it was back then, and it was when he was at the March for Life. He videoed into the March for Life, but they dropped him, and I'm like thinking to myself, who is for marketing, research and marketing? I mean, didn't somebody at this toothbrush company, figure out who Ben Shapiro is and who they're partnering with? It's just, but this happens all the time. Or like there'll be that Black Rifle Coffee. That's one of them. They were promoted heavily by conservatives, and then Black Rifle Coffee blew up, and now all of a sudden Black Rifle Coffee is poo-pooing on the conservatives.
Yeah.
It's like it's really interesting about advertising, how the right and the left advertise and stuff like that. But it's essentially the same, really.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Listen, I got a bathroom behind me. I got a plunger. I'm gonna call it a patriotic plunger, right? If anybody wants to buy it, $50. Just send me $50. You'll get your patriotic plunger, and you'll be a great American, right? Listen, Julie. Listen, this Hillsdale College thing, it's a thing that's popular on the right. It's big time on talk radio. I know their intentions are probably well. I'm not sitting here suggesting that they're trying to, scam money or anything like that. I think they believe in the message of the historical foundations of America from that classical liberal perspective. I think they're being true to themselves, and I understand that. I guess my frustration here, Julien, and I want your final thoughts on this, is that as a country, we're going nowhere. In fact, we're going backwards. The left continues to win. The culture is just a moral debased pile of garbage at this point in history. The culture is rotten to the core. The political system is corrupt. And guess what? The financial future of Americans, especially the middle class, we're starting to get crushed. My question is, where is the hope in America? And can the conservatives, Julien, can they give us any hope to get America to make it great again, I guess you could say.
Well, I never really had hope in conservatives in America because I'm not a conservative. Shocker.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm a monarchist, so but I'm not a so I to me the only true conservatives are monarchists in my opinion. But for liberal conservatism, it does nothing for me. So I mean, for me, I don't really see there is any hope in what conservatives are going to do for this country, because this country will continue to keep going left. This country will become more corrupt. We're living in a time where the gulf between the haves and the have-nots is literally Middle Ages. Yeah. There has not been this much economic disparity since the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And the amount of insanely individual rich men that take pleasure trips up into outer space for 8 minutes. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I mean, and they live in these ugly, ghastly houses, and they have they have maybe 10 people working for them. I mean, back in the olden days, you had a manor house, a great house that implored that of a family that was probably the Duke and the Duchess and his maybe 5 children, waited on by an army of servants of 50,000. The job of an aristocrat was to be the main employer. Now you have somebody like Jeff Bezos that doesn't pay his workers a living wage, and he's worth billions of dollars. And within the last 2 years, he's quadrupled his income. And I bet you he has multiple homes, and I bet you he has a staff that waits on him and his family of about maybe 20. But yet he's worth billions of dollars. What are you doing with all that money?
Julien, you're not envious, are you?
Oh no, I could care less about Jeff Bezos as well. What I'm trying to point out here is that the elites of the past understood that their position and their status in life did not resolve them of their responsibility to take care of the less fortunate.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But of course, we had, again, the moral principles of the church that were in place to, again, when you talk about first principles, to love your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's what our God teaches us. We don't have those same principles. In fact, in America, you could argue if there is a first principle, is me, myself, and I. That's what the concept of liberty has at least turned into. Maybe it wasn't intended that way by the founders, but that's what it's turned into. And that's why I say, as we wrap this up, Julien, what does the word liberty even mean? Hey, listen, if you want to give me a legal definition, fine. But everyday people on the ground, the way they interpret it, it means license. It means narcissism. It means I get to do what I want to do, kiss my rear end, I'm an American. That's what it means. That's what I've seen. I've seen that both on the left and on the right. And I think, for Hillsdale College, I'm not accusing them of any malicious acts, but it is an act by many of the political right that's getting old. I see it all over the place, right? I see it on talk radio. I see it on, on the internet. I see it on television. All the while, the country heads further and further and further to the left, and nobody has any answers at all. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank my friend Julien. Buddy, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Julien, and I'm sure we'll be back soon. I want to thank my good friend again, Julien DeMarco, for joining me. Great conversation as usual. This is Frank signing off for Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.